This film is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, so if you pick up a single or seal product, there's a link in the description below with the code Kenobi at checkout to get 5% off your order.
Yeah. All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. See this? This is my boomstick!
Ash Williams, the protagonist of Evil Dead, is a horror icon. Where most horror franchises find their monsters and big villainous entities becoming iconic and prevailing in popular culture, Evil Dead has, for better or worse, become synonymous with a wisecracking, charismatic asshole.
Groovy.
Beyond being simply the lead of the Evil Dead franchise, Ash is interesting in himself for his development and change over the course of 3 movies and extended media, where he goes from part of an ensemble cast of young teenagers being affronted in the woods by ancient evil to being this charismatic, suave arsehole who ends up being the hero through either guilt or a sense of needing to simply to survive. He is unique even within the pantheon of horror heroes and protagonists in that sense. The wrong dude in the wrong place can make all the difference, at least when it comes to Doomsday Demon summoning prophecies. So when Magic the Gathering said they were going to do an Evil Dead crossover, I was very excited and I jumped at the chance of being able to purchase and then play with some of my favourite parts of one of my favourite horror franchises. There are 101 intellectual properties I want and desire as Universes Beyond cards, but Evil Dead was the secret lair I didn't know I needed. And I think it's perfect for the secret lair treatment too, with iconic elements that we can do across a few individual cards, and it being a bit too niche to really be a whole set or a whole Commander product. Although I would have loved to see a Halloween release that is basically 4 big horror giants facing off against one another. Imagine 4 decks, Evil Dead, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween all facing off against one another. I mean, you couldn't find enough stuff to fit into the Halloween deck, I guess. You probably have to add other horror stuff to it, but I thought that could be a cool thing. A fever dream. Either way, I began to pour over the Evil Dead cards like we all do, like massive nerds. Cheryl is the zombie token, which is Ash's possessed sister, quoting a Deadite taunt from the first movie. Zombie Apocalypse being the mysterious tape recording from a previous researcher whose recital of the incantations from the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead, brings about the Deadite infestation. Solid theming. My absolute favourite card of the lot is Cabin of the Dead. This is wonderful. The Evil Dead's most important addition to horror canon is the creepy canon in the woods that wasn't really a cliche or a trope prior to Sam Raimi kind of immortalising it within the series. The fact it gets to make a horde of zombies, or dare I say an army of undead, as the game progresses and escalates is wonderful. And it's super cute that we get to see another piece of Evil Dead iconography in the car and the art. Linda is the Canarian Queen, Ash's possessed girlfriend as a mouthpiece for the demonic invasions summoned from the book. The art is fantastic and evokes one of the creepiest parts of the original movie. And then we have the finale of the original movie where Ash destroys the threat by burning the book in a fire, has vanquished the horde. Cute. And I love this art style from Josh Newton as well. It evokes the VHS covers of horror movies of old that I would find down my local rental shop. I am an old man. And finally we come to Ash himself, holding his famous chainsaw aloft his head. Importantly, he doesn't replace his hand in this movie. That happens in the second film, so he has both hands here. The art is phenomenal, and off the top of my head I think it looks a bit more like Evil Dead 2 Ash, which is a bit more iconic prior to his shirt getting torn and everything, but he looks fearful and stressed out, not comfortable, which is perfect for Ash. The flavor text is absolutely on point, explaining the need for such brutal violence upon the Deadites and the demons. But what is this card? Pure Steel Paladin? A non-legendary knight of all things who is a payoff and a value engine for equipment? What? Linda, his possessed girlfriend and antagonist, is a legendary and Ash is not? What? I'm a huge fan of these movies, and the Evil Dead Secret Lair is basically aimed at someone like myself, and Ash not being legendary was almost a deal breaker. It didn't end up being a deal breaker because I'm a whore, but I bought it anyway because Cabin of the Dead. And these cards plus the Creepshow ones are going to be a fantastic base for an entirely horror movie themed Commander deck that I'm going to try and build this month. I've been a huge fan of these movies since I saw Evil Dead 2 on a VHS copy with my father when I was young, and I love Ash as this charismatic asshole character, a character who is often tortured physically, emotionally and mentally by the forces of the Evil Dead in a darkly comedic way. It's slapstick, it's silly, and his attitude is not one to emulate. He's not the hero you want to be, he's just a dickhead who is in the wrong place at the wrong time and ends up having to be the protagonist through no actual choice of his own. He doesn't want to be. He is the reluctant hero of the Evil Dead. So why isn't he legendary? This is arguably one of the most iconic horror protagonists of all time. Even if there are people that you'd put higher up on your list, maybe Larry from Halloween or Ripley from Aliens, if you really want to say the Alien franchise is a horror franchise, it wouldn't be difficult to argue that Ash is visually more iconic. Not because of his actions, but because of the character design. This chisel-jawed, chainsaw-for-a-hand, shotgun-wielding action hero of a sort. So why can't I play him as my commander? That's so strange. There are two reasons we buy these products, right? Purpose one is collectability for nerds like me and whales, and people who look to collect memorabilia that makes them feel something in the hellscape that is late-stage capitalism. And the second purpose is to play with the characters that we love, that we've grown up with, that bring us comfort and joy. And whilst I can still play Ash in a deck, it's bloody strange that the literal hero of the series is not legendary. Why? What is the reason for this lack of legendary? I generally think this might be one of the biggest fails or oversights in the entirety of the universe's Beyond stuff, except for besides leading with mechanically unique limited time purchase options for a franchise that no one was expecting or cared about. Got him. But that said, I do believe that Wizards of the Coast do get it right most of the time, so I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt and kind of think about why they've done this. Is it because he isn't a conventional hero? Self-preservation is his central driving force through the first two movies, and he fails to save literally anyone besides himself, having his friends, his sister and his girlfriend murdered twice. The second movie is both technically and rather literally a remake of the first movie, because I didn't have the rights to the first movie when they made the second, so they just retread some ground and spiced it up with a better budget. It's weird. If anything, in the first movie, he is less central to begin with. It's kind of a bait and switch where he becomes the surviving main character. We saw this in the 2013 reboot as well, where you think one character is the Ash standard and it turns out to be someone else. That movie's phenomenal too, by the way. I haven't seen the latest one. Oh God, this makes me sound like a fake fan, doesn't it? I didn't get to see it in the cinema, we had a baby, and it's not on streaming services in the UK yet. I'm quite excited to watch it. So perhaps him having his non-legendary status makes sense from that perspective. It's a statement about him being the everyman, I guess. After all, Evil Dead as a Secret Lair is focused on Evil Dead as in the first movie, where his character is a lot more forgettable, meek, and lacking in the suave, catchphrase-ridden and arrogant charisma and smart talking that he's known for today. Ash as a character actually goes through a huge transformation through those three movies, from being, like I said, the coward of the group in the first movie, through to being like incredibly arrogant and smart talking in the third one, to a fault actually. But over time, of course, people tend to remember the lines and the iconic bits when he shoots someone with a shotgun, blows the end and says groovy. That's not actually where the groovy line comes from. It's when he saws the end of the shotgun off. Whatever. The Secret Lair is not focused on Evil Dead 2 nor Evil Dead 3, which is actually called Ash vs. the Army of Darkness. And I perhaps think that would be a really cute way of showing off how not so special the characters in the first movie are, and how not so special the general cast of characters in horror movies are. They are the everyman, not heroes. But that just doesn't really work here, does it? Ash's girlfriend Linda is a legendary creature for the conventional reasons that I believe we normally have with legendary creatures. Named characters become legendaries so we can play with them in the command zone. And from a fan expectation, I don't think anyone was itching to play with Linda in the command zone, where people were itching to play with Ash in the command zone, if that, well, I didn't know I wanted it until it was dangled in front of me, I guess, but you get where I'm going with that. Linda herself is not exactly iconic per se, but she is possessed by the central entity of the invading demonic force, I guess. I don't know. I don't think this justifies it. And further to that, if we're doing everyman forced to survive in a traditional horror setting, I don't know if Pure Steel Paladin makes sense for Ash. What is Pure Steel about him? His chainsaw? Paladin? There's nothing knightly about his cowardice in the face of adversity in the first movie. If anything, him becoming a knight is part of the third movie's switch into the genre of fantasy comedy. And yes, his equipment is important to how he fights the forces of the undead. He's crafty. I think he's a little bit of an inventor in some extended media. It's been a long time, but I think in the Dreamcast game they present that he's like sort of modifying his gear. Sure, but that's not really the case with Ash in Evil Dead 1, is it? Hell, his chainsaw hand, custom holster, modified shotgun, or mechanical hand are all elements from Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. I just don't get it. I don't understand why Pure Steel was chosen. And if we're going down that route of he becomes a knight in the third movie and equipment is super integral to how he fights the forces of the undead, then there's better choices than Pure Steel Paladin. Sir Gwyn, hero of Ashvale, a knight that is 3 colours, evoking his arrogance and self-serving nature with red and black, although those are character traits from other movies, but also his impulsive and determined personality too. And it basically does what Pure Steel does, but legendary and more interesting, having access to more more colors, and I can play in the command zone. And that's an interesting question too. I've wondered if I should build Ash and then just see if people let me play him as a commander as part of the Rule Zero conversation. But I will build him synergistically. I will build him with equipment in mind, some sort of Voltron value engine, and people will probably get annoyed that I'm playing such a good card in the command zone that couldn't typically be in the command zone. I did ask on Twitter, is Pure Steel Paladin too strong in the command zone? And 68.5% said no. So it's a good indication that not everyone will be pissed off with it, at least until after they've played against it. Let me know in the comment section below whether you think Pure Steel Paladin is too good for the command zone. And beyond Sir Gwyn, I think even Jor Kadeen, First Gold Warden, or Astor Bearer of Blades feel a bit more apt, especially if we include the chainsaw, shotgun, or the car as part of the secret lair. But that's a much wider change to the product, and I think the rest of it's pretty good. I just do not understand why he's not legendary and why he's a Pure Steel Paladin. It also begs the question why they don't do like mechanically unique here and there, and then the rest of it being reprints. So we could have had a mechanically unique Ash, for example, and then a load of reprints. I get, and I also don't like having the mechanically unique stuff show up in the secret lair initially and have to wait for the list slot to get the magic within one and the much more readily available and accessible ones. But I also think it would open up an area where then we don't get this big of a disappointment for characters that people really like. I would have also taken any kind of disruptive human soldier at legendary. Imagine a gender swapped Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, or 3 CMC Thalia. I know. I'm biased. I love Thalia and I love Evil Dead. So perhaps, yeah, okay, that's a bias there. I think they kind of dug themselves into a hole by only referencing the first movie, with a generic Evil Dead approach allowing them to depict Ash in the third movie, for example, and thus I think Sir Gwyn is the absolute best fit for that. I respect the dedication to the original movie a lot, but considering the fact that we're probably never going to see Evil Dead cards arrive on Magic cards ever again, I think a broader brush would have been better. It would have helped to capture what makes Ash such a fun and interesting and iconic character, the douchebagness of the character, and the iconic elements to him like his chainsaw hand that's missing from this. The first movie is much more interesting for its setting, its filmmaking, its violence, and the stories around it, and Sam Raimi, the director, than it is for the central character. Ash really evolved since then into the second and third movies as Sam Raimi adopted the comedy angle and Bruce Campbell really lent into it. So ultimately I'm giving the Secret Lair a thumbs down. I still bought it, which is probably a bad indication for where we're going, where people will give things thumbs down and buy it anyway. But I do really wish that they would not have made a character like Ash non-legendary. It's just a strange choice. But ultimately, I hope they look back on this as a mistake and learn from it for the future. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I'm sorry if you clicked this video thinking it was going to be interesting and you just heard a dickhead talk about how much he likes The Evil Dead. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.